Hey guys, today I'd like to take a look at a mask that I find very interesting and one that is rather hard to come by. You don't really see too many of these, and that is the 1998 Don Post Studios Blood Skull. Now this one is of course instantly recognizable as one of the most widely produced designs generally from Don Post Studios, and that is of the skull mask. Now the skull was produced for many years, and its design went through quite an evolution. It was offered in both red versions, glow-in-the-dark versions, white versions, in vinyl, mostly different colored vinyl. And I am certainly no expert in the Don Post skull history. But there's a great thread by the Crimson Ghost on the HMA, the Halloween Mask Association forums, that really details a lot of the history of the skull mask. I'll touch on a little bit of what he says about the blood skull in this video, but other than that, I won't try to rehash the history, certainly, of the Don Post skull masks. Now, this mask in particular was only available for 2 years. In 1998 when it was introduced, and in 1999. And so first let me show you, here is a page from the 1998 Don Post catalog from Pete's great archive at the Devil's Workshop. Thank you, Pete. And then here is the 1999 catalog, and I'll zoom in a little bit closer here because this is a very good picture of this mask, a very good scan of the catalog. And it really shows the mask. So this was really a re-release of an original mask from Don Post Studios. And this information that I'll tell you about the original is from that thread from Crimson Ghost. And that is that it was first known in 1976 as a blood skull or red skull. Although I have not seen, and I don't know if any copies of the 1976 catalog are available. Please, anybody help me out in the comments if you know more about that. But Crimson Ghost states that in 76, there were 2 different sculpts used for the blood skull. Here is a photo from that thread of the 2 different sculpts, the larger and the smaller versions. And he states that in 77, it was changed to the vermilion skull. And here's a page from the 1977 Don Post catalog showing that vermilion skull. But this one is a reissue of the blood skull, and up until this point, the vermilion skull hadn't been reissued, but this is a reissue of the blood skull. And it does say blood skull here on the tag. There's a couple of differences, obviously, between this and the original. I'm not quite sure what sculpt was used for this. Again, I'm not an expert in the skull masks or sculpts. But this one has an interesting treatment on the eyes. And it looks like the eye sockets were actually filled in from an original mold or master or sculpt, and then the very small slits put in the center of that material that was filled in to give this wrinkled effect, which is kind of interesting. This one was also cut out in the nostrils, and something that I haven't seen before in a skull mask is that the gaps were cut out here and here, only on this side. There's a couple gaps on the other side that weren't cut out. I'm imagining that was for the wearer to be able to breathe a little bit better. But this was a mask that was made in China, and during that period, they were pretty thin. So this is very thin latex, and it does appear to be red latex, and so that the paint job on it could be minimal. With the black wash over it, as you can see in the white teeth. Now this one does actually have an imprint right in the mold that says made in China. And you'll notice that the slit on the back of this one stops pretty far down, so it's a very tight fit for the wearer to try to get this on. Usually that keyhole for the slit would be way up in here. This one stops less than halfway up the copyright information there. Now, there were in the 90s some latex skulls produced other than this one, and I'll show you an example here. I think I showed you this in a previous video, I'm not sure, but here is another 90s latex version of the skull mask, and this one's kind of creepy looking, the paint job on it, but I don't think that these are the same sculpt. If you look closely, there are some differences. There's differences in the lines here on the side of the skull. There's some differences, which I think you can see in the nose. It's a little bit shorter sculpt, I believe. And obviously the eye sockets are not filled in, but I don't think it's the same sculpt. It looks, on close examination, some of the shapes here in these lines on the skull are different. But that is another vinyl version from the 90s that was put, or excuse me, latex version from the 90s that was put out, again, very thin. And now also reissued in 2012, and I did a video that featured this mask, but I'll just put it here for comparison. This is a reissue of the Vermilion skull, which again, here's a 77 catalog of the introduction of the Vermilion skull, and but this is a reissue from 2012 that was actually never publicly available. It was when Don Post Studios shut its doors, so they never actually made it to the retail market. But you can see there's a pretty significant difference between the two. This one is in vinyl, and so it has a lot more sculptural detail retained in that sculpt. This does look like a very similar sculpt to this one. These lines are very, very close, if not identical, but I don't know if the same sculpt was used. So taking another look at this blood skull, this is a very deep red, as you can see. I guess it's the combination of the latex red color with the black over it, but it's kind of a very creepy looking mask, and I think it displays well. I do have it stuffed with a little bit of plastic to sort of round it out a little bit for display, but yeah, if you can find one of these, I would definitely add it to your collection, only because it's very interesting, and it's a reissue. And it's only available, was only available for those 2 years, 1998 and 1999. And so, yeah, I don't really have too much more information about it other than that, but I think it's interesting. And so that is the 1998 Don Post Studios Blood Skull. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you next time.